Hello, so today we're going to do the story of Hagar. So in our last story we learnt about Lot getting into trouble in Sodom with the war and Abraham dropping everything to go rescue him. And we also heard again about God's promise to Sarah and Abraham that they would have their own child. And Abraham believed God even though it looked absolutely impossible. But God's promise took a very long time to come true. So it had been a long time already since God had promised and nothing had happened. And every day Sarah was getting older and it was getting more impossible for her to have her child. So she came up with a plan, a way to help God keep his promise. So her plan is something that sounds very strange to us, and it's something that was normal in her day. But it's not a good thing and it's not a right thing. So her plan was that Abraham could marry her maid, and then if the maid had children, then Sarah and Abraham would have some children because Abraham would be the father. So it sounds a little bit like a clever plan. It's a different way that they can have children because it's impossible for her to have children. But that was not what God had in mind. And you know, when God made marriage, when he made Adam and Eve, it was one man and one lady. And that's always the best way because that's the way God made it. And whenever there's more than one, there's always a lot of problems. So Sarah was making a big mistake with this plan, even though it was a normal thing to do at the time. So she came up with a plan and told Abraham, and Abraham listened to her. And so Abraham married the maid whose name was Hagar, and their plan worked in a certain way. Hagar did get pregnant, but then she started to look down on Sarah. So Hagar was the maid and Sarah was like the mistress or the boss. But Hagar started to look down on Sarah because Hagar could have children and Sarah couldn't. And then Sarah wished she hadn't done what she'd done because now her maid was looking down on her. And I don't know, maybe she felt a bit jealous too that Hagar could give Abraham a son, and so it caused a lot of problems. And Sarah, good old Sarah, she did what we often do when we get annoyed about things. She went to Abraham and she said, Abraham, this is all your fault. You married Hagar and now she's looking down on me and not treating me nicely. This is your fault. Now, that's not very fair, is it? Though it's all Sarah's idea and Abraham just listened to her. And now Sarah's blaming him. If I was Abraham, I would have said, hey, that's not fair. This was all your idea, Sarah. How do you put the blame on me? But he didn't. He said, Sarah, Hagar is your maid. You can do what you want with her. And so Sarah was very unkind to Hagar and maybe made her work really hard. And so Hagar ran away. She ran away from her problems. So she was very proud and looking down on Sarah. And then the next thing, she's running away. She's running out into the wilderness, into the desert. She's all by herself. There's nobody out there. But God was out there. And God sent an angel to Hagar and said, Hagar, what are you doing here? And where have you come from? Where are you going? So the angel knew Hagar's name and called her by name. And Hagar said, I'm running away from my mistress because she's been unkind to me. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Hagar, you need to go back. You need to go back to Sarah and you need to listen to her. I don't know if Hagar wanted to hear that, but then the angel also had a promise. He said, you're going to have a son and you're going to call him Ishmael. Now Ishmael means God hears, because God had heard Hagar's sadness. You know, Hagar had kind of just been used. I don't know if she wanted to marry Abraham. I don't know if she even had a choice. She was just kind of just being used to try to make Abraham and Sarah have children. So God had heard her unhappiness and he'd sent an angel to come and talk to her. And he said, so you will have a son that you will call Ishmael, which means God hears. But I will bless that son and he will have many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so much that you can't even count. Now Hagar, she felt very special that God had seen her out in the desert where she was all by herself, and she made a name for God. And that name in Hebrew is El Roy, and it means the God who sees me. So she felt special that God cared about her. He heard her and he could see her out in the desert where she was all by herself. So God can also see you. He is the God who sees me and you. So Hagar learned something special about God, that he is the God who sees. And he's not just the God who sees. Like, he could just see all of us. But he also cares. He cared about Hagar. He sent an angel to talk to her and comfort her and to tell her what to do. So God not only sees us, it is good to remember that he sees the things that people do to hurt us, and he sees the things that we do to other people to hurt them. He'd seen what Hagar did to Sarah, and he'd also seen what Sarah did to Hagar. But he also cares about us, and that's why he sent the angel to go and talk to Hagar. So God is the God who sees, he's the God who hears, and he's also the God who cares about us. And that's a comfort to know. But it also means we need to be careful what we do, because God does see us and God does hear us. But if we love him and try to follow him, then that's a really big comfort. I have a challenge for you. I would like you to get a piece of paper and write the God who, and then I would like you to see how many things you can come up with. So Hagar said, the God who sees me. And we talked about the God who cares about me, the God who hears me. And I encourage you to see how many things you can come up with, things that you know about God, because there are a whole lot and it's really good to think about. So it's a challenge for you. Oh, but also Hagar, she listened to the angel. She went back to Sarah and Abraham, and she did have a son, and she did call him Ishmael, the God who hears.